Welcome to On the Road to Literacy Success. I'm your host, Dr. Staci Bain. This is a podcast where good humans gather together so that we can figure out what is working, what is not working, and what we can continue to do to improve literacy rates for all. It's going to be an adventurous journey, so buckle up, sit back, and enjoy this ride. Welcome to On the Road to Literacy Success, a podcast that spotlights educators, advocates, and researchers dedicated to reducing the messiness of teaching and learning while translating research into practice. For literacy success, I'm your host, Dr. Staci Bain. On today's podcast, we are honored to Zoom to California and speak with Kareem Weaver, a notable civil rights activist, film documentary star, speaker, author, dad, and all-around incredible human, driven to ensure the right to read for everyone. If you've heard about or watched the Right to Read documentary, then you know Kareem Weaver. He's unapologetic, unwavering, and undeniably one of the most notable literacy powerhouses in the world today, and for good reason. Have a listen and let us know what you think. Here's our incredible guest, Dr. Kareem Weaver. Mr.
Hello
Kareem
there.
Weaver, how are you today?
I'm doing fine. Thank you for the warm introduction, Dr. Bain. I appreciate it. I'm looking forward to this conversation today. Glad to be here.
Thank you. Thank you so much for your time. You've been all around the country. Tell us what's going on. What has been your message? What do we need to know?
So the message is really simple. There are some things that have to be present to get kids reading, and you have to deal with the source, which is the university programs, and making sure they're aligned with the research consensus around how kids learn best, that teachers, when they get into the classroom, they know what to do, they're prepared to go, and they can get busy. Teachers also need materials that actually have evidence of working, which for one strange reason after another, people have excuses why they can't provide that. But our kids are not guinea pigs, and they do deserve materials that are proven to work. State departments have a responsibility to look at the root causes and not just chase Band-Aids and shooting stars. And so while people are learning, one, they shouldn't have to pay for learning. That means that state departments ought to be footing some of this bill along with districts. And two, you have to have a safety net in place so that while people are learning and figuring this out, the kids aren't just left by themselves. So there has to be an effort to do things now to support kids while at the same time learning. And the last thing is, there are others, but these are the high level things, is that leadership matters. Leadership matters. And it's not just a matter of having a checklist or a blueprint or a strategic plan. There are some adaptive challenges. The peopling has to go right, because this is just as much a culture as it is a program issue. You're not just going to rubric your way out of this. Our kids need help. And humans, regular people, not superheroes, have to be able to do this thing in a way that works consistently. And that takes some adaptive leadership, which we haven't recruited for, we haven't trained people in as a sector, and it's high time that we do.
Talk to us about your leadership when you worked in the role. Talk to us about your North Star. I love how, as a leader, you were a visionary, you stuck with things. Paint a picture of what that looked like when you were a leader so that people can walk in your shoes and mirror the leadership that you had. Which I know you're super humble.
I'm not sure they want to walk. I'm not sure they want to walk in, but I'll do it. Listen, first of all, I'm gonna go back to the other thing really quick. The last question you asked about what I'm telling state departments is, one last thing is, they have to look at what works. And there are examples around the country of districts and states who have figured this out. LEAs who figured this out. And it makes no sense that we start reinventing the wheel every couple of years when we have others' hindsight that we can glean from and learn from. So one of the messages I also give them is, let's examine and study the things that work and what doesn't work so that we don't make the same mistake again. So as far as my leadership journey, okay. So I led in a few different settings. I led in a K-12, a K-5 school. I led in a K-12. I was an administrator in the Department of Juvenile Justice facility in South Carolina. So I've done a bunch of different things. And what I will say is, this is nothing new. And I think sometimes people think that this is some new pendulum. No. This has been on the table for generations. You can look at, matter of fact, the Department of Justice put out a report on recidivism that talks about this very thing. That's over 30 years ago. You can look at what Marva Collins was doing, in Chicago, and that was years ago. It's not new. It's just that we, for whatever reason, haven't paid attention to examples of success. And so rather than do that, we start guessing and we default to our own way that we learn to read, which many of us who are successful in education, it's because we're in that small group that just kind of learn to read using any method. And so we think that that works for most kids, and it does not. So for my journey, I was a teacher for a long time in Atlanta and a little bit of South Carolina, and then in Oakland mainly. And they thought I was cheating after a while because the kids were getting pretty good results. And I'll never forget that I actually was called into the office, and a district rep came in and said, look, and he handed me a letter, and it said that basically the students' performance did not align with their expectations for students for this demographic. I'll never forget that. And I didn't understand it. Well, I was just angry. I was angry at the low expectations. And I was angry because they didn't understand. I think they knew how hard it was to get kids where they needed to be, and they didn't appreciate or recognize that I was willing to pay that price at that stage of my life. And so it wasn't free. It wasn't like it just happened. It was a cost to that. It cost me a marriage. It cost me my health. It cost me a lot. I mean, I'm just back then because we didn't have the supports. And so I was a little resentful and bitter that they just kind of, they didn't, I was being captive by their low expectations of themselves as well as the kids. Some of us are go-getters. Now, but I say that not with pride. I don't want that for anybody. I don't want anybody to have to go through that at all. But I learned through that. And then I became so indignant that I became a principal, and we did the same thing at a school. And then the school was shut down after a few years. It had always been intended to shut down, and the fact that the kids were now reading and excelling, don't let that stop a good plan. And so I became so angry and frustrated with these systems who seem to have other priorities that I was like, this dog won't hunt. It's untenable. First of all, it's pernicious and it's unseemly. But I decided to then focus on things at a bigger scale because the small container I had clearly wasn't big enough for what I was doing. And so then I trained principals for years. I did some central office work. I did a bunch of stuff. And finally, I just said, what the heck with all this? It's just literacy, 24/7. We're going to get this going, come what may. They may not like it, and a lot of them don't, but it's all right. They're going to be all right. I'm going to be all right, So that's a little bit of my journey. It was born out of necessity, a little bit out of frustration, but a laser focus on the fact that it is possible. It's been done before, and I'm no rocket scientist. I just follow what works. And it just so happens that the kids, English only, bilingual, whatever designated, SPED, they all learned. And so when I say it's possible, it's because I've seen it, I've done it, I've studied it, and I'm intimately familiar with what low expectations looks and sounds like at an institutional level.
Talk to us about where, in addition to ensuring that kids were reading in your school and in your area of influence, talk to us about other places that you've seen, other leaders that perhaps are not getting the recognition that they deserve, that you would like to lift up and bring their name to the table. So
Okay.
feel free, shout them out.
Yeah. So, everyone should be filling up the inbox of Dr. Kelly Carvajal Hagman, who formerly was in Seaford, Delaware. Now she's in Milford School District. I think it's closer to home, and she, whatever. Their work in Seaford was featured on the Ed Trust podcast, Extraordinary Districts. And they went from being lowest in the state, almost taken over because it was that bad, to being tops in fourth grade reading. This is over a 6-year period or so. Like that just, it's mind-blowing to me. She actually wrote me the other day and said, Kareem, because I've been trying to encourage her to spread her message. There have been a few articles, a couple of things written. The Ed Trust podcast, nobody even pays attention to. Nobody watches that or listens to it. Don't ask me why, but they don't. And I was talking with her about it, and she said, well, if you'll help me, I'll tell people. So she agreed. Find a couple of podcasts that are willing to tell a story. Find a couple of conferences, and I'll go. So I'm gonna hold her to that. But she is supernova in terms of her work, and because to go from 0 to 100, it's not perfect, but we looked under the hood. We went to go visit, and the intentionality with which they approached this, it was the team at Seaford. Everything from the professional development to the curriculum to the decision to just start with those who are willing. It is a phenomenal story. Students who are living in poverty, students who are second language learners, all subgroups moved. Nobody even knows her name. Nobody knows her name. We got a lot of people out there talking a good game who haven't done a doggone thing. But Dr. Kelly Carvajal Hegman, people should have her on speed dial. But it's me and my shadow blowing up her inbox. That should be a change. We have to have an appetite for what works. So I would start with her, and I would say I'm reluctant about identifying her and having people go look her up, but she asked for it, so and there you go. So these ambitious podcasters, the people who want to get out there and get the word out, there's one for you right there.
I love that. I love that. And say her name one more time.
Dr. Kelly Carvajal Hegman. Now, I was able to connect her with the California Reading Coalition, so she'll be interviewed at their big conference. It's virtual. And then I just sent an email connecting her with a podcast. We'll see what comes of it. But I'll probably do one or two more, and then she's on her own. But she's a winner. She's a winner. And she has the benefit of having the connections to a team at the district level, to the local university. Yeah, she's the bomb. Now, there are Kellys all around the country, but most of them are so busy doing the work, they don't really talk about it too much. Like, that was me for a long time. I was teacher of the year or whatever, principal, but nobody knew who my name was because I didn't want to hear about all that. I'm teaching, I'm leading, and people who are doing the work don't have a lot of time for stuff. I'm only mentioning her because she said she was willing at this season in her life. She wants to spread best practices and share her experience. So that's the reason why I lift her up.
I'm so glad that you did. Absolutely. And we'll definitely link her information in the show notes if that would be helpful, as well as your information. Does that sound good?
That sounds good. Sounds good.
More models of what works. I love how you're saying we already know. We already have models of what works. Let's just replicate that. Let's not have duplication of effort.
Well, so one of the things that I learned listening to that EdTrust podcast is that different things work in different settings. So, for example, what works here in California probably wouldn't work in Florida. The culture's different. We chose a curriculum in Oakland, for example, because it had a social justice lens. Primarily. I mean, it was aligned to the science of reading for the most part. It's good, but this is Oakland. Like, this is home of the Black Panthers. So it's got to have some social justice. Now, that won't fly in Florida in a lot of places. That's okay. Different strokes, different folks. But you have to find what works for your context. There are some groups like, what's the name of that? I think it's a consulting group. Gosh, the name escapes me right now. PG Consulting or PC Consulting, I forget. But they actually build curriculum. They built the one in Chicago, and they built ones for the Texas Education Agency. They are dynamic, and they align it to the science of reading, and so it's customized curriculum. Now, they work with the district. Now, not everybody, most of it's out the box. Most companies have a kit, and you buy the kit or pieces or components. But there are some out there that actually we'll customize, but you have to know what you want. You have to say, listen, we're prioritizing results. We want oral language development throughout. We want to make sure that we have these 5 pillars, and we want it to be synthesized, and we want to make sure that teachers can do it within X amount of time to prepare. That's critical because Chicago gets 300 minutes to prepare every week. West Contra Costa, which is a neighbor of Oakland, gets 100 minutes. You can't have 300-minute curriculum with 100-minute prep time. You understand? Like, I understand your ambition and your desire to get this fancy, elaborate thing, but that's not what your system is built for. There are things that can work for 100 minutes, not many, but there are a couple, So we have to be honest and be clear about our structures and what's going to work for us, both in terms of the cultural context and the logistical conditions that we have on the ground with our teacher, labor association contracts and the culture of the place. And we have to do what works for kids within that context and be dogged about finding evidence of things that claim they do.
What do you think about supporting teachers and how they teach in the classroom? I'm understanding that you, as a leader, you were very intentional about practices in the classrooms to ensure results. Just like I've heard you mention before, when you visited sites such as the one that you spoke about before, you have been very impressed with the intentionality of instruction. Yeah. So regardless of instructional materials, talk to us about what are the main things that you would want to see in a classroom, such as starting with explicit instruction.
Yeah. Well, Okay, so every school, so from a leadership lens, we're going to have some instructional agreements. Usually it comes from the leadership team. That's a group of teachers, staff who come together and identify what are our priorities this year. And with that, you build out your observation, your feedback template and everything so that when you come into the classroom, everybody knows what you're looking for. And you're giving them feedback every time you come in. That's the first thing. So you have to have some instructional agreements and norms and a focus for the school. If you don't have a leadership team, get one. Otherwise, everything rests on your head. Right? There has to be a team of folks that can carry the weight, even if you have an assistant principal, even if you have some coaches, that's all fine and well, but you need some staff buy-in as well, and the best way to do it is to get a leadership team on board going in the same direction. With that being said, there are certain things that are accelerants. Oral language development is an accelerant. It's not something that is just an add-on for the bilingual kids. It's got to be the coin of the realm. When you look at greats like Marva Collins and her instruction, and she was doing Shakespeare and Thoreau, and they had plays in the classroom, and they were doing these productions, it wasn't just because she wanted to do theater. It was because that's oral language development. And that includes mastering the etymology of language, meaning how words are built and constructed and meaning, and weaving that throughout your content areas. Like, that is critical. And so what a lot of people do with the best of intentions is they want to advocate for students who speak a second language or who are learning a second language by having a separate thing for them that is specific for that. Okay, that's fine. I get the intentionality for that behind that. But as a classroom teacher, I didn't have time for that. So what I did was I just did it with everything. Oral language development, ELD, or what we call English language development, that was in math, that was in history, that was in science. Like, it was just what we did. And so what the people above me didn't understand is that's pouring jet fuel on their learning. That's in every class. Now, that it may only be a 2-minute intro, it may be a 5-minute segment, it may be woven throughout, it may be how I structure it, and it's an oral presentation, and there's certain structures that support language development within that. But it's all the time, and it just becomes the coin of the realm, and it is an accelerant. And so, unfortunately, people think that it's just for bilingual kids. So I taught a bilingual class for about a dozen years, but it also had kids in there who were monolinguals, who only spoke English. I had kids who were black, brown, every race, every ethnic group. It's Oakland. It's a very diverse city. They would give kids to me because I knew how to teach kids to read. So please go take this young child who doesn't speak any other language but English, but he won't sit still, and we don't know what to do with him. You're a man. You teach 5th grade, a 4-5 classroom. You handle him. What they didn't understand was my secret was this. I would go to those kids, and I would say, look, man, usually they're boys. Look, man, I know how to teach kids how to read. So, and I'm good at it. Been doing it for a long time. If you're cool in this classroom, if you sit down and work hard, I promise you, I will get you reading. I never had a kid walk away from that deal. Never. And so I had a class, and then once you get the reputation of, being that teacher, then you get a class full of kids like that, which was fine because those are some of the brightest kids you ever want to meet, but they just need the skill. So I really want people to grasp that. When you're setting up a program or thinking about what are the key factors of your program, it's consistency, it's culture, it's curriculum, it's feedback. The consistency. So I'm in every room every day. When I'm principal, I was in every classroom. And when I was at a bigger school, I had designated rooms to go in, and then I had people go to those other rooms every day. And sometimes I go in those rooms too. And it wasn't just for accountability. That was the main thing was consistency and support, and teachers deserve feedback, actionable, consistent feedback so that they can grow their practice. So I have worked with people who really struggled, and my reputation as a leader was that I knew how to grow teachers. That was my rep, and I was proud of that rep. So if I went to a school site as an assistant principal, they would give me some of the teachers who were really struggling. I was like, cool. It may take some time, but we're going to get there. We're going to make it. Feedback is a gift. And so I would say instructional norms, making sure you have those things in place. Usually if your leadership team can help you, but also giving people consistent feedback and not getting bogged down in all the minutia and administrative paperwork and all that. You got to get in classrooms. You got to give people actionable feedback, which means that leaders sometimes well, all the time, we also need to develop our practice and to have professional development and go to training so that we can give good feedback, so we know what we're talking about. And people will actually welcome us into the room instead of rolling their eyes like, oh my God, here he comes or here she comes. They don't know what they're doing. So those are some of the things that I really prioritize as a leader.
Do you think that one of the reasons why you were able to give such great feedback is that you could have and probably did step into the role of teaching to be able to demonstrate, show, model, so that you were more of a side by side
Well,
than I read this in a book, and maybe this is my feedback to you. Like you know how to teach people how to read. You did that.
yeah, absolutely, absolutely. So a couple of things. First of all, I love teaching, and I understand that managing is a part of it. I get that, and there's a place for a manager, but you have to. This is the season for instructional leadership, and if and teachers know you can't count a teacher. We know if you know what you're talking about. We just First of all, your reputation probably precedes you. They already have probably discussed where you came from, how you were as a teacher. The teachers probably already know, right? So you can't jive unless maybe you come from out of state or something. But other than that, they're gonna track down some proof about about you. The second thing is they can tell by your the fruits of the tree. The feedback you give, the way you lead professional development tells me everything. If you give a whack PD, we already know you weren't a good teacher because no teacher wants to sit through some terrible PD. We already know right off there. We know how you spend your time. And so I would just say, for me, I I had some credibility because I had been a teacher in that district, especially. Matter of fact, I had one guy, he was like, Weaver, just tell me how you did it. Okay, cool, I will. No problem. Now, not everybody has that benefit. You can grow your practice and study, and if that wasn't your experience, you can still be a good leader, but you have to be honest with people and say, listen, I'm growing my practice too. I'm learning too. Don't try to con people and try to act like you were the greatest thing since sliced bread. That's not going to work. But if you're honest and say, listen, we can do this together, and I'm learning, and we can develop some instructional norms. That's why the leadership team is so important, and coaches are so important. So it's not all on you. The mistake a lot of principals make and school leaders is that they consider their role and how people accept them as a referendum on their professional expertise. And they take it personally that people don't want to, they're insecure about their own background. And so they do things and say things because they don't want people to know the truth. Just be honest. They're going to find out anyway. You might as well just be honest about your experience as a teacher and your struggles. That might actually draw people to you. And then just say, listen, we're going on this journey together, and I'm going to be the head learner here. You will not outlearn me. And there are some things that we're going to agree on and figure out what we want to prioritize, and I will manage towards that and support you in your efforts to get there. That's it. And just be honest. That's the advice I would give school leaders. Don't jive people. Don't try to, play the smoke and mirrors game. Just be honest. Go through your season of learning and be transparent about it. And here's the kicker, you have to have a culture. You have to promote a culture of evidence-based practices and transparency. That means we share data. Yeah, we share data. The whole school, we share data. And I know for some people, this is like an atomic bomb dropping. I get it. I was in one of those schools too. But we're not here to hide. I'm not hiding mine. It's not your data. It's the school's data. These are our kids. And that first grade teacher has the right to know how the kids do when they leave their room. When that kid goes to second grade, they don't just get amnesia. They invested all that time in that child and their parents and family. They ought to be able to look at the data and say, Jorge's struggling. I wonder what's going on. Maybe there's some insight I could have. Maybe there's something I can share with you. Well, I know his grandmother. You don't. That's the person you really need to go talk to. Forget about the parents. Go to grandma, right? So that comes from a culture of transparency and honesty. It's hard to articulate why that's so important, but that's the difference between having a school team versus a school of lone wolves. And that lone wolf strategy is for the birds. You got to get people to buy in. You got to get vertical alignment. You got to get a bunch of things that require working together, and transparency around data is a big piece of that.
Talk to us about a strategy that perhaps you implemented in your past with transparency and maybe not having everybody on the same page. So a way for people to talk about their complaints or their difficulty that they were having, some type of paper trail system. I've heard of you speak of that before. write something down because you were in classrooms.
Yeah. Oh, so you know your stuff. Okay, let me. So I know what you're talking about. I think I do. So I had a system. So first of all, I went to the second school I was at in Oakland. I intentionally went to a place that was on fire, figuratively speaking. The parents had been on strike. They took all the kids out because it was wild, and they just refused to send their kids. So I was coming in an environment that was a level 10 in terms of the stress and all that type of stuff. So every environment is different. So, but for those schools that are what they call high needs and then super high need schools, people get used to running you ragged. And that becomes part of the culture is we're going to keep you busy so you can't be, so you won't be able to do these other things. And you can't allow that to happen. You can't get caught up in busy work and paperwork and everything else. And then you're never in the classroom. You're never talking with kids and teachers and parents. You're just, at that point, you're not even a manager. You're just, I don't even know, you're an emergency firefighter or something. And you got to fight that. I heard someone say, if you wait in your office for problems, they will come. So you got to get on that floor and you have to let people know that instruction is your priority. I had a system in that school where I worked with my admin assistant, Matilde. We came up with a form where if you had a concern, you would write it down. That's it. Just write it down. And there were things. It was on one side English, one side Spanish. You wrote down who, what, when, where. What. I want to know the details. You write it down. What happened? When did it happen? Who was involved? What's your perspective? Are there any? Just write it down. And then when you're done, put it in this box in the office, right there on the office counter. Put it in the box. It's yellow, big yellow paper. Fill it out. Here's a stack of pens for you. Have at it. And I promise you, I will get to you within 48 hours as a principal. If it's an emergency, meaning it's a safety issue or an instructional issue of dire consequence, then here's a box that you check. Matilde will verify that, and that goes in a different stack. You'll get a response either by the end of the day, within 24 hours at the latest. Now, I did that because when things are on fire, people get used to, just kind of, they forget the main thing, and they just handle they deal in emergencies. And so what my purpose was, I got to get in classrooms. I have to focus on instruction every day. And so that's what I'm going to be doing. So put that concern in the box, and I'll get to it, when I get to it, within a certain amount of time. I see your concerns, but this is about instruction. And if I have, 10 kids in the office, and at the beginning of the year, it was like that, 10, 15 kids in the office, they would come with me. So I would bring kids with me as I went from class to class to class to class, doing my observations, giving feedback, writing down the things that I saw, focusing on the things that the instructional leadership team said were priorities. And these kids just got to come with us. Now, the kids who came with me, they got a dose of reality, because now you're going around the rest of the school and seeing other kids focusing and paying attention. They also realize that, they're now vulnerable, because any of those children can tell their parents what happened. And also, no one wants to have a bad reputation. I know kids like to act tough and all that, but no one wants to have a bad reputation. There is some context in secondary where it's advantageous. It's a defense mechanism. But for the most, and that includes teachers. They don't want to see their kids, going from class to class to class. That looks bad on them. So miraculously, in short order, it went from 15 to 10 to 5 to 2 to 1 to, that's not that big a deal. We'll talk about it later, Weaver. But they knew that instructional time was instructional time. And it also gave them a system for dealing with true problems and emergencies, those the teachers and the parents. But we are not going to get derailed from instruction at the teacher level or the principal level, because that is why we're here. Our business is teaching and learning. That's why we're here. Everything else, we can support and encourage and cajole and all the rest, but teaching and learning is who we are, is what we do, and nothing's going to get in the way of it. So that's some of the processes you can put in place. It's a simple thing. You need the help of your admin assistant. she's got to be professional and diligent, or but you got to get in classrooms, period. Whatever system you can create, and also have a way to deal with emergencies, whether it's a walkie-talkie or something. So that's one of the things that I think fits it.
I love how you always talk about your North Star of teaching and learning, that our business is teaching and learning.
That's right.
So just to wrap up the last couple of questions, a question would be, it's the beginning of the year, and what seems to be trending, especially on the West Coast, is that everybody belongs. Talk to us. Teaching and learning, everybody belongs. Talk to us. How do we thread that needle?
Everybody belongs. What do you mean by everybody belongs? Say a little bit more about that.
Belonging. So our initiative this year is belonging, that everybody feels as if they belong in this school. And that's what we're going to focus on. That's our central message. That's our one initiative that we have. I'm just hearing that that's seeming to be quite popular these days, that
Yeah.
we all belong.
Yeah.
To me, that seems as well that we can't have competing initiatives. That it would seem that everybody will belong in society when we have an opportunity to read, write, and spell, because our 21st century skill is the ability to be able to access written expression. So talk to me. What are you thinking? Have you heard anything about the belonging initiatives?
I've heard plenty. But I wish I could ask you some more questions about that, because you have a good take on it. Well, I'm wondering, why do you think do you think that's a competing priority with teaching and learning?
I think that if we want people to understand what instruction looks like, then in the classroom, we can create opportunities for everybody to access and be included in instruction when we have instructional methodology that supporting every scholar in the classroom. So I would offer that having conversations about belonging when we're doing system approaches that are the antithesis of ensuring everybody belongs in society,
All
I have
right.
a difficult time with that. So we're in a system in which we're doing balanced literacy. We're still doing a lot of center activities, not a lot of explicit instruction to be able to teach kids how to read. How are kids going to belong? I'm having some cognitive dissonance around
Yeah.
that, knowing that leaders are not necessarily supporting teachers being successful in the classroom while having a narrative around, we're going to make sure everybody belongs.
Yeah. I'm glad I asked you.
Opinions on that. Thank you.
Yeah, I do. I'm glad I asked you, because that's a very valuable perspective, and I hear you. And that perspective is usually not given airtime. You would be called insensitive. You would be called cold-hearted. You would be called all kind of names, because the opposite position is draped in such the trappings and accoutrements of unity, love, and togetherness, and everything rainbows. Look, I believe in self-actualization. I believe in true empowerment. And belonging, there's nothing that jeopardizes a child's belonging or sense of belonging more than their inability to understand what the heck is going on, because they can't read. We could all look the same, have the same culture, same religion and background and all the rest. I can't read and you can. I'm on the outside looking in. I don't care what kind of belongingness curriculum and program you have. And now, I'm not against belonging, but I want kids to have the agency to choose what they belong to. Okay? Because not everything should be chased after to belong to. You get that twisted. As a parent, I don't want my child belonging to everything and everybody and every club out there. I have agency as a parent as well. And so out of respect for the community, the families, and the children themselves, instead of sheep herding kids into a certain mindset or group, we have to empower them to make informed choices, preferably with character that can empower them, their future, their families, and their community. Go ahead on. Belonging is fine, but that's not the North Star. The North Star is teaching and learning and literacy and ability to have self-determination. In African-American culture, we have this holiday called Kwanzaa. Now, Kwanzaa is an ultra black person. Now, a lot of black people don't even know about Kwanzaa, but for those of us who, it's like it's the blackity black. Those of us who are really in the culture, we love Kwanzaa. The second day of Kwanzaa is called Kujichagulia, which means self-determination. We have these 7 principles, and it's the second one of the Ngosapa. It's the second principle. It's my ability to determine my own course and chart my own path. That is what true empowerment is. It's not just following behind you and belonging to what you say I should belong to. I might not like what you belong to. Newsflash, people are different. Cultures are different. ethnic groups and classes and families, and there are people. That's okay. That is okay. You don't have to listen. I want you to like me, but as a teacher, if I am desperate to have all my kids like me, they will sniff me out on the first day of class. I will be held hostage. Listen, I want the children to respect me, and I want them to work and to learn and to grow. And I am committed, because I love them, I am committed to their self-empowerment. Whether they like me or not, we're going to learn today. And that's a mindset I mean, I hate to be the Grinch that stole Christmas, and I'm not trying to be anti-belonging. Like, fine, belong. Parents ought to have some say-so about what their kids belong to. Let's just make it plain. And so the proper course is to provide students with the skills that they need to determine their own course and learn what they want to learn about history, culture, religion, whatever they society at large. They can go to the library and figure out what they want to belong to. They can talk to their parents and grandparents in community institutions. And so there has to be some humility on our parts. What we want to do is set up a school community that is industrious, that is persevering, that is hardworking, that is focused. And when that happens, and when kids know that you will not leave them behind, when they know that you're going to make sure that they have access to what they need to learn, you will be amazed at the community in the sense of belonging that creates, an esprit de corps that cultivates. But I'm keeping the main thing is teaching and learning. That's what the parents want. That's what the kids need. And really, that is a right to a free and appropriate public education that every kid has. And so I just, I'm all for belonging. I think that can be fine, but let's calm down. Let's make sure that let's centering our own selves, norms, and values as the end all and be all. Our job is to teach. And we can do that in a loving and supportive and caring and a responsible way. And here's something else. Now, your listeners, I'm just going to tell like it is. As a father I've had, my son, when he was in high school, he played football and baseball. He was about 6 foot tall and six pack, and very handsome young man, hair all over the place. Let me tell you something. I am very mindful about how he was cultivating relationships with his teachers. Hello, somebody. I know this is not comfortable to talk about. I'm mindful. My daughter, my youngest daughter, when she was a senior in high school, prettiest little thing you ever want to see. Smartest. I'm mindful about the relationships, about the color and the character of the relationships that she developed in school. I'm not saying that I don't trust teachers. I'm just saying, as a father, that's my first job, is to keep them safe intellectually, spiritually, physically, and everything else. So this is me as a parent talking, and as an educator, that there are rules of the road. And so, yes, we want to build healthy, constructive relationships. Yes, in service of the North Star and respectfully and responsibly, but we can't put ourselves on some pedestal like our relationships are the end all and be all. Some kids just don't like you, and that's okay. They still got to learn, and they have a right to learn.
Yeah, that is a really good word. Speaking of good word, talk to us. Any books in the making? What are you doing? What's your
For
next?
me, how do you know? Okay, so first of all, I would recommend that there are a few books that I would recommend everybody check out if they have the time. If people are busy, if they have the time. I would say Marva Collins has a book called The Marva Collins Way. You ought to read that book. It's a good book. There's a book called The PRIM, the Pre-Referral Intervention Manual. They have one for behavior and one for academics. It's an old book, and it's expensive, and it's hard to get. Every school ought to have one, a PRIM, Pre-Referral Intervention. In other words, instead of discipline this child, when I see this behavior, these are the interventions that I can do. Here's a list of 15 things I can do for this behavior. And there's like 300 of them. That needs to be in a resource in the school. I am working on a book with a partner of mine, Dr. Aaron Gillette, University, one of the universities in Minnesota, around what teachers need. I'm not gonna get a title right now. I don't want to give up the game, but we're excited about the project. We got a couple of publishers we're vetting right now, but it's going to be, what do teachers need to be supported and to be encouraged? What do they need from the adults around them, from the system, from their families? What do they need? And it'll be from two different perspectives. I'm a teacher, a principal, and a community advocate, And then her side is she's a college professor. She was a teacher too, but she's also a college professor. And so, I'm looking forward to it. I really am. We're about halfway done, and it's an exciting project.
That's fantastic. When that book comes out, do you mind coming back on and doing a book talk about it?
I will. I'll bring her with me. She's I actually met her at a conference. We were at some conference, and she was there, and she was talking about what she had observed in the session, and she was taking notes, and she shared them with me, and I was like, this is phenomenal. We should write a book about this. She was like, okay, let's do it. So how about we both come on and we can talk about the project then.
That sounds fantastic. That sounds fantastic. So, closing remarks, my friend. If you could wave your magic wand,
Mm.
what would the world look like in 5 years from now?
Well, I'll just stick to education. I won't go the whole world. I'll just stick to education. I would say that the role of the educator has been clarified in a way that they're well prepared, they're given the skills and the tools they need, and it is something that regular people can do and maintain their health and reach all kids. That students would be able to read and understand, and that would be an intentionally crafted program from K to 12 with vertical alignment, so that when they get to college, they can navigate complex text. I would want a world where leaders took responsibility and stopped blaming each other and blaming others for the failings of the system. You are in charge of the system, doggone it. Mr. and Miss Board Chair, Mr. and Miss Superintendent, you're in charge. So I would see a world where board members have a literacy item on their agenda for every meeting, and that they hire a superintendent and manage their superintendent towards the best literacy outcomes for children, and that parents would be able to hold them accountable at the ballot box for the board members, and for the superintendents, they hold them accountable because they're in direct conversation with their board members or their supervisors. So that's the world I see. But at the end of the day, the North Star is children are able to read. With that, anything's possible in a whole number of sectors, whether it's religion, the economy, whether it's, you name it, just social structures and societal institutions, that with the skill of literacy, that all those things begin to thrive, and the health outcomes then therefore improve.
So, how can people get in touch with you? If people
Ah,
want you in their school, if people want you as a speaker,
oh
I
man,
know that you're
okay.
very busy. You probably do not want this information out.
Yeah, so I'll put it like this. So we have a website, fulcrumliteracy.org, and I believe there's a place on there where they can go and make some comments and request things. There's a person on my team who's kind of in charge of that, of booking things and managing things. I just go where they tell me to go. Like, if you call me, it's not going to work too well. But if you call Trinity or Lori, it's all good. And they are in charge of kind of navigating that world and finding opportunities where we can engage. And I will say this, I don't care how big it is. I don't care if it's 2 people or 2,000 people. I'm from a religious tradition where they say, with 3 more gathered in my name, there I am also. So it could be a small group. I've had church meetings with like 5 people. And then I've done conferences with thousands upon thousands. And to me, it's all the same. The kids can't read. Let's get it. So I look forward to opportunities with universities. It could be, whatever, however we can be supportive. That includes coaching support. That includes diagnostic support with folks on our team. And we have a small team, but we're pretty mighty. And, we do with what our funding allows us to do. And we're limited, but we do the best we can with what we have. And so any way I can be a support for people and institutions and educators, especially, and parents, we're happy to do so within the limits that we have. But go to the website, fulcrumliteracy.org, or you can email Trinity. She might be mad at me, but I'm going to give her email, trinity@fulcrumliteracy.org, and you can get a hold of me that way.
That sounds fantastic. Would you like me to link all of that information as well?
Website,
My
yes.
the
Sure, go
email.
ahead. Go ahead. Why not? Go for it.
Let's
She'll
fill
cuss
that
me
out.
out later, but it's okay. It's all
Mr.
good.
Weaver, I'm so honored to be able to have this time with you today and to continue to watch your journey as you impact the world. So thank you so much. Do you mind if I close with a few words?
You go right ahead.
All right. Thank you for your time today. Your expertise, wisdom, and commitment to ensuring the right to read for everyone is beyond inspiring. We look forward to celebrating literacy wins with you, connecting with you in social media, reaching out for future speaking engagements. We, meaning I'm speaking for the community at large,
I got
and
you.
learning from your smart mind and committed spirit. I like to say that it only takes one person to change the world, and you're an excellent example of that. You're changing the world, doing whatever you can, wherever you can, whenever you can, and with whomever you can. So thank you for that. You work with whomever you can. On the road, listeners, this is your call to action. If you have not yet stepped boldly into the right to read for everyone, this is your time, this is your year, this is your chance. By living courageously, speaking for truth, and shaking things up in your space, Kareem continues to leave the door open and the keys in your hands, our hands, to drive literacy success forward in the districts in which we serve. So be that change, just like Kareem Weaver. Educate is here for any questions, contemplations. Fulcrum is here for questions, contemplations, and further support. So I'll link all of that information in the show notes. Thank you, all good humans, for listening. We'll see you next time on the road to literacy success. Kareem Weaver, thank you.
All right. Thank you. Great job.
Thanks for tuning in to On the Road to Literacy Success. Be sure to subscribe to my YouTube channel, Dr. Staci Bain, and connect with me on all social media platforms. Don't forget to sign up for my newsletter and visit goodhumanseducate.com for all of your Tier 1 needs, including our new asynchronous courses that were made with a TikTok vibe, because PD should never be boring. If you enjoyed this podcast, leave us a Good Human review and share it with your friends. Keep slaying Tier 1, instruction, and systems. We'll see you next time on the road.